Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Before I carry on with my presentations, I have three things to highlight. First of all, the paper presentation today is one of my findings for a research titled The Relevance of Kalam to Comparative Religion, which I have attempted for about a year ago. I would like to thank International Islamic University for giving me the generous fund, as well as providing me the enough period, good period for my sabbatical. And thank you also to EC for having me as a visiting scholar. At the moment, I and a number of members, academic members from public universities in Malaysia are working on a book on Kalam and comparative religion. We have managed to secure about 7 or 8 articles. Inshallah, we are going to publish a book. I promised Dr. Amran before KLIKS 3, but I'm very unfortunate. I am still looking for a few more articles for the publication, inshallah. And thirdly, the reason why I attempted this research, having been trained in Usuluddin, I would say that I'm not so having so profound knowledge, but Alhamdulillah, having been trained in Usuluddin and coming to IIUM when the department decided to have comparative religion as part of the program, I come to a conclusion that a Muslim cannot do comparative religion without Usuluddin. So that has actually triggered my curiosity for this topic. And when Dr. Amran came to me a few years back, deliberating on the possibility of doing the discourse on Kalam, I thought that is, match to my interest, and here I am. So the objectives of my paper, even though if you look at the topic, you may think that it's quite ambitious for me to talk about 3 giants of comparative religion of Kalam, but that was because this was my engagement in the research. But I'll share some parts of my findings. So first of all, I would like to justify the feasibility of the Kalam method in the study of religions. I will tell you why. Secondly, I will highlight, some of the argumentations attempted by the 3 giants in their works to show how Kalam is how Kalam address the problems of religions. And the third one is, of course, to promote Kalam in the contemporary Muslim scholarships of religions. Okay, why is it that I think it's a big deal for me to justify that Kalam is important as a method to understand or to study religions, and what actually the problem with Kalam? Well, it is not really a problem, though I put the problem. The issue is, if you talk about comparative religion, this discipline is developed in the modern Western context, and it talks a lot about objectivity, fair, neutrality, unbiased study of religions. I've mentioned this in the previous KLIKS. So my hurdle when doing comparative religion and Usuluddin is that if you go to the works of Usuluddin and scholars of Kalam, there's a lot of criticisms, commentaries, debates, jidal against the doctrines of other religions. So how is it possible for Muslim students, Muslims who do comparative religion, to reconcile between the two? Because at the one hand, the discipline of comparative religion requires you to be neutral, to be fair, to be objective. Talking about objectivity, there is also another discourse about whether it is possible to conduct an objective study of other religions. Obviously, if you look at Kalam, and taking from that perspective of objectivity, it's very impossible because all the times we are going to be very judgmental. Ismail Raji Faruqi discusses a lot in his works, and I think he's one of the best person who managed to overcome these problems of objectivity. At least he has one significant contribution in overcoming this problem of objectivity. He wrote the book titled Christian Ethics and its Quintessence, Christian Ethics. Okay, now the problem here is because for example, Jake Swardenberg, in his book titled Muslim Perceptions of Other Religions, he has actually written a number of books on Muslim scholarships of religion, and he said this. Yeah, he said that, for example, the first one said the study of other religions to the Muslims is very polemical. He said the study of religions in itself could not, however, be seen as something very useful for Islam and the Muslim community, except for apologetic or polemical purposes. So he said that Muslim scholarships of religion is very apologetic and polemical. And second, he said, when we study other religions, we have to be normative, and this is a hurdle. He said, none, with exception to al-Biruni, somehow he acknowledged al-Biruni, of which I think he has misunderstood al-Biruni, none of the books discussed were written exclusively for the sake of knowledge of the religion in question. The religion is put within an interpretive framework, and the author draws his conclusions with the aim of somehow distinguishing good from bad. This is very much what we have been doing. It's normative. And thirdly, he said that when Muslims do comparative religion, we try to exert the sense of superiority of Islam over other religions. So you see, the very existence of other religious community which absolutized their truth and doctrines contradicted the claims of superiority of the Muslims community. Because we feel we are superior, so we study other religions. And he said also that the reason why Muslims get so much engaged with other religions because they were very much driven by the Muslim Christians polemic. So this gave me a lot of motivation to study whether, well, at least these three giants, were they very polemical? Were they normative? Were they able to be fair in their treatment to other religions? Why I pick up these three? Because they were more or less contemporaries, even though they were in different contexts, coming from different contexts. You know, the Ibn Hazm in Andalus, and then al-Biruni in Khawarizmi, and Shahrastani in Afghanistan now, in Central Asia or Iran. So more or less different contexts, but they have also quite similar challenges. For example, Ibn Hazm was living in very pluralistic society. It was not very harmony political situation during his time. There were also, by his time, there were also sectarians among the Muslims, especially in Aqidah, Mazahib al-Aqidah. And al-Biruni was in India. At that point of time, Muslims were having very hostile attitudes to the Hindus. Yeah. Okay, now let us look at how these scholars claim what they interested to do in their study. For example, Ibn Hazm, he has no reservation. He's very straightforward. He said, what did he say? I'm going to study and I'm going to use my sensorial premises. So he's using an empirical approach. Sensorial means he going to do observations, and look at the experience of the Christians or of the religions that he studied. He mainly studied Judaism and Christianity. apart from other religions. And also he said that we did this in accordance with establishment of such proof which do not contradict the origin from which they are derived. So therefore he studied the Bible and the Torah to address his criticism. And of course he said we have excessively engaged in verbal description and in giving up convolution. So he has dialogue. He asked people, the Christians and the Jews, for their opinions, their deliberations. So, okay, I'll discuss about his method later. Now, what about al-Biruni? Al-Biruni said that my book is not polemical. My book is nothing but a simple historical record of fact. Yeah? And then al-Shahrastani said that these are what I can achieve from the sayings of the experts. It means that he also contacted people of religions, discuss with them, deliberate and get information from them. And I have quoted as they are. If you do comparative religion, you know that this is one important criteria in comparative religion, to be able to get the information from the sources and to communicate them as they are, to understand the religion as it is, which means that you are not expected to put your perspective on the religions under study. Now, in general, I'm so sorry for the very small font there, but that's the best I can do, having no technical background. Yeah. So, if you look at Ibn Hazm, al-Biruni, and al-Shahrastani, I categorize their work as such. Ibn Hazm, of course, his work is theological and polemical, very polemical, and he outstands the rest because he adopted biblical criticism method. And with regard to al-Biruni, even though Wardenberg say that he's not very, he's not polemical, but no one can deny that he study religions at the plane of theology. Yeah? His is not polemical, but I will show to you, even though he said that he's not polemical, but he did share his perspective and criticism. And modern scholars of religions praise al-Biruni as a method as very objective and regard that he subscribed to the phenomenological method. Today, phenomenological method is one of the widely accepted method in the Western and modern study of religions. And finally, al-Shahrastani, of course, he adopted theological method, less polemical. So he tried to, it is called, he tried to do a encyclopedic approach to the religions. The next one, oops, sorry. Where is the pointer? So the next, the second level of the table, talking or mentioning the religions under study. You can see there are, a number of religions. I think the three scholars did not leave any religion behind, which means that they study Christianity, Judaism, Sabians, Magians, Hindus, Brahmins. But I would like to highlight the third level. That's why it's quite light in color. Ibn Hazm also criticized Muslim sectarians. He criticized the Ash'arites. He criticized the Mu'tazilah. He criticized the philosophers. Al-Biruni also discussed Muslim festivals and compared the Muslim festivals to the Indian or to the Hindus festivals. And al-Shahrastani also discussed these groups or sectarian within the Muslims. So you see, the Muslim scholarship of religions does not only focus on other religions as well, but also the intra-religions in their presentations. What about the approaches? Sorry for the font again. Now, the book written by Ibn Hazm, I think everybody knows the book, but for the purpose of precision, he wrote Faslul Kitab al-Fisal fi al-Milal wa al-Nihal. Whether you read al-Fisal or al-Faslu, So scholars have given their opinion. Al-Faslu means a compilation of sections and chapters, and some scholars read his title as Al-Faslu, which carries the meaning of distinction between true and false. Both are applicable. And I think all of you know of his approach. He's a Zahirite. He depends on textual, literal, and linguistic approach. Nevertheless, he subscribed to empirical method. He used common sense. He used logic. Of course, dialectical, but very systematic. He used the authentic scripture available during his time when criticizing the Bible. He criticized Ash'arites and Mu'tazilites alike, the philosophers as well as the mystics, because he thought that these sectarians, they understand the revealed text only by human means, not literally, the way he adopted it in his approach. And he was aggressive in his approach, and this is understandable because the time that he was living, it was the time during the fall of Umayyah, and political instability and pluralistic society and the challenges from the Christians and the Jews. His work is an outstanding contribution to the critics of Bible. He commented that the Bible is lack of coherence. He questioned on the authorship of the Bible, on its authenticity issues, and he argued on the divinity and the doctrine held by the elders of the church. So let's take a look at one of the example. So in his discussions, one of his discussion, he described the Jews living during his time in his context. So he divided them into five groups. But he has also major division of the Jews. One, those who denied abrogation. And the other one, okay, this is too small. And the other one group that denied accepted abrogation, but denied its possibility. So one group totally rejected abrogation, another group accepted, but they believe that it couldn't happen. Why? They believe it couldn't happen because they do not accept the idea that God changed his mind. Yeah. However, here in the blue box, I put the citation from Ibn Hazm, saying that it is possible for God, if he wanted to change his mind, because it is his supremacy and his credibility and authority. So he is citing from the Quran. So he was citing from the Quran when he rejected the Jewish denial of abrogation. And then he took from the Bible, from the Torah, where is it? He justified it taking from the Torah. I'm sorry, it is not there. I don't know where is it. So for example, he said in Leviticus, chapter 18, verse 18, there was an account that Jacob married Leah and Rachel. But this was prohibited later. Like earlier on, polygamy was made possible in the Jewish law, but later on it was stopped or it was prohibited. And there was also the problem of the instruction from God to Moses in Deuteronomy, in which God instructed Moses to demolish the local people. But then when the local people approached Musa alayhi salam and offer a treaty of peace, he accepted it. And then God decided that, okay, you need not to punish them. So this is recorded in Joshua chapter 9 verse 27. So these are the examples of why is it that God changed his mind in the Torah, and Ibn Hazm criticized that abrogation do take place or does take place in the Torah, and it is not like what the Jews have been claiming, that it is impossible. The next one, this is it, sorry. Al-Biruni. Now, I think for those who studied Biruni, you are also aware of his methods and approaches, how he is very prominent. What is his name? So al-Biruni, for example, when he studied the Hindus, he took the initiative to be in the counter of the Hindus. In his work, he explained that he took a lot of efforts to learn the language of Sanskrit. It was very difficult for him, but because he wanted to understand Hinduism the way it is, so he took all the effort to understand Hinduism. Now let's also share with you one of the examples of which he took from the scripture, from the Mahabharata. Well, actually, he took from many texts, Hindu texts. For example, the idea of God, as cited in Patanjali, in Bhagavad Gita, and in Samkhya, these definitions of God were clashed to each other. They were not coherent. And for example, he said some group of Hindus, they believe in God of abstraction. Another group believe in anthropomorphism. So he said that the educated group is inclined to understand God in abstraction, and the uneducated group is comfortable to understand God with personalities, taking God as personal. So, and what I'm trying to highlight is this one. In his work, even though we saw just now that it seems that he did not criticize, or he tried not to be polemical in his approach, but he did criticize. So, for example, when in one of the discussion, the Hindu said God is just like a point, and they deliberated that the God of this point is about 12 fingers long and 10 fingers broad. So he said, indirectly, he said, Ta'ala anit tahdid wa ta'did. God is above this criteria. I'll skip the rest of the page because I want to, I'm sorry I cannot discuss Shahrastani, but I hope you understand what I mean. I'm trying to show you, to demonstrate you, the examples from the three prominent scholars. So this is my discussion. Okay. If you can follow my argumentation just now, I'm trying to show to you that there is no single approach in Kalam, even though we thought that they are generally polemical, they are normative, so on and so forth. But if you look into more details, you find that there is no single method in Kalam in understanding religions. And as a matter of fact, the way Muslim scholars conducted their study of religions are just like the modern scholars, because they go to the sources, they do the field work, they do the observation, the critics, but they are also very rich in providing the argumentations, which is, and this is not done by the modern scholars. What else? Now, the Muslim scholars also is different because, different from the modern scholars in the sense that they do not look at religion and revelation as incompatible. They can justify on purely rational and logical grounds, and they take from the revelation as well. They rely heavily on scriptural texts of religions, and they take the scriptures as the ultimate authority of religion. And that's why you see why al-Biruni and Ibn Hazm, for example, go to the direct sources and put their criticism. Okay, this is my next argument. If you look into the way the Muslims conducted their the study of religions in comparison to the modern approaches, is that whenever the Muslims study religions, they started off with this Tawhidic idea. They take from an integrated understanding of religion that, you know, God tells man about him, tells man about religion, and also man is actively involved in the process. Man tries to understand, man tries to make sense, use his senses to further understand religion. But the modern approaches is different in the sense that they take that human understanding of religion as merely experiential, if you know, on top of rational. So rational and experiential. So we do not know whether, you know, God up there is communicating to us, or, you know, at which level of communication, whether this communication is important or not important. So that's why you see the modern scholars of religions now resolve into different approaches, historical approaches, anthropological approaches, sociological approaches, psychological approaches, because religions are perceived as mere experience. But from the perspective of Islam, from the approach taken by ulama Kalam in the past, you know, religion is taken at the level of revelation, at the level of experience, and both are very dynamic relationship. So that is the reason why Muslims have to adopt a normative approach towards the study. So I guess I don't have enough time. Let me conclude my presentation. Please excuse me if I have to read to make sure that I'm able to you know, synthesize what I'm trying to explain today. So Kalam has greatly contributed in defense of religious truth, even at the plane of interreligious encounter. Despite its polemical and apologetic outlook, the Kalam tradition is strongly built upon rational, empirical, and metaphysical tools. The revisit of Kalam is urgent not only to Muslims intellectuals, but also anyone involved in interreligious discourse, since Kalam is loaded with intellectual vocation that deters dogmatism in religion. In the context of Abrahamic religions, it is crucial that theology and Kalam, being its component, to be taught not only to the Muslims, as well as to the Christians and to the Jews, and applied in the contemporary study of religions. The fear that Kalam nurture biasness should cease, as it was in Kalam that the Abrahamic theologians developed their interreligious discourses with intellectual openness and veracity. Kalam being the discipline that reconciles Islamic tradition with the Greek and the Christian traditions, Christian intellectual philosophy, has showcased the flexibility of Islam in accepting goods from other traditions and civilizations. Even the Jewish intellectualism could not resist the subtlety of Kalam. In addition, intellectual openness, which is sought after in the discipline of comparative religion, is, in fact, the trait of theology, and Kalam Without intellectual openness, there can never exist a collection of theological treatises written by the Abrahamic theologians in defense of their religious truth. Intellectual exercise and intellectual veracity are crucial in theology, for otherwise the notion of God will fall into dogmatism. Scholarly revisions on the definition of intellectual openness and objectivity, the one that I mentioned earlier, are direly needed, for otherwise the legacies of theology in the study of religions will remain marginalized despite the foundational role it has played in the early history of interreligious encounter. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.